After months of whispers, the Princess of Wales stepped back into the public eye, and the world held its breath. When Princess Catherine emerged at Trooping the Colour, time seemed to stop. She hadn't been seen in months, not since the devastating announcement of her cancer diagnosis. Speculation had grown louder with each passing week. Rumors, reports, silence, and then without warning, there she was, resplendent, composed, and impossibly regal. The nation, and indeed the world, had been waiting for this moment, not simply to catch a glimpse of her, but to feel reassured that she was still the woman they remembered, the woman they revered. All eyes were meant to be on King Charles. It was his birthday celebration after all. But in a display that no one could have predicted yet, everyone subconsciously yearned for. Catherine stole the show with nothing more than her presence. Standing beside her children, her posture was dignified, her expression serene. But it wasn't just about appearances, it was what she symbolized: resilience, grace under unimaginable pressure, and perhaps most importantly, hope. This wasn't just another royal engagement. It was a return that carried the weight of a nation's emotions. Dressed in royal regalia, she reminded the people of what the monarchy could be: elegant, enduring, and deeply human. The cameras didn't just capture her, they celebrated her. Analysts and viewers alike noted the transformation, not in her clothes, nor her poise, but in the quiet strength that seemed to emanate from within. It wasn't the Catherine of last year. This was a version molded by pain and healing, by battles fought silently behind palace walls. And yet, even as the cheers rose in the streets, even as her image adorned newspapers around the globe, an unspoken question lingered in the air: is she truly back, or is this just a fleeting appearance, carefully choreographed to ease public concern? Could this be a temporary return, a single act of public duty before retreating once more into privacy? The weight of that uncertainty hung heavy despite the smiles and the applause, because beneath the surface, everyone knew battles like hers don't end in a single day, and while her return was triumphant, it wasn't a guarantee. It was a moment, a fragile one. And the world, still breathless, wondered if it would last. But just as hope bloomed, a sudden twist left everyone shocked and worried. She was on the guest list, the world was watching, then she vanished without a word. Royal Ascot has long been a crown jewel of British tradition, a glamorous event where appearances are not just expected, but deeply symbolic. So when the printed programs listed the Princess of Wales as one of the attendees alongside Prince William, King Charles, and Queen Camilla, the anticipation was palpable. Cameras were poised, commentators rehearsed glowing introductions, fans clutched at their smartphones, eager to glimpse the woman who had recently stolen hearts with her courageous return. But just minutes before her scheduled arrival, everything changed. Without warning, whispers began to ripple through the press line. Catherine wouldn't be attending. No official explanation. No statement. Just silence, where excitement had once been. For those who had followed her recovery journey, it felt like a gut punch. The images of her just days earlier at Trooping the Colour had painted a picture of resilience, a triumph over adversity. But now, that illusion of strength began to crack. Was something wrong? Even more baffling was the palace's insistence that she was never scheduled to attend at all. Yet the program said otherwise. Her name printed in ink, a promise to the public now broken. For journalists and royal correspondents, the contradiction was glaring. For the public, it felt like something was being hidden. The silence screamed louder than any official denial could muffle. Speculations surged in an instant. Had her condition worsened? Had the fatigue from her treatments returned with brutal timing? Or was this a calculated retreat, meant to shield her from overexposure too soon? Every theory only fueled more confusion, and beneath the confusion, concern. Then, as the royal cars rolled in, another twist. It was Carol Middleton, Catherine's mother, who stepped out instead. The substitution was quiet but striking. Carol has always been the steady force behind her daughter, fiercely private, rarely in the spotlight. But now she stood where Catherine was supposed to be, her presence subtle but loaded with meaning. It wasn't just a family member filling a gap, it felt like a message. Carol's appearance stirred even more questions. Had she come as a silent representative of her daughter? Or was she shielding Catherine from an event she simply couldn't face? And more importantly, what was happening behind palace doors that none of us were being told? And the mystery deepened as the palace scrambled to explain what no one saw coming. When Catherine went quiet, her mother quietly took the reins. Carol Middleton had never sought the spotlight. Yet over the years she had quietly built a reputation inside the palace gates as something far more powerful than a public figure. She became the unwavering protector of the future queen. As the founder of a party supply empire, Carol was no stranger to pressure, but nothing could have prepared her for the storm that swirled around her daughter's illness. And yet when the world leaned in for answers, it wasn't Catherine they saw first. it was Carol. At Royal Ascot, where Catherine's absence sent shockwaves through the public and press alike, it was Carol who arrived in her place. No announcement, no explanation. Just a mother walking into one of the most scrutinized royal events of the year with quiet determination. To the casual observer, it may have seemed like a polite gesture, but to those watching closely, it was a powerful signal. A silent admission that her daughter needed space, and that Carol would step in, no matter what. This wasn't the first time Carol had shielded her daughter from chaos. Long before Catherine entered the royal family, Carol had taught her how to remain composed under pressure. She had weathered media storms, navigated relentless tabloid invasions, and fiercely guarded her family's privacy, even when the crown itself could not. Now, in Catherine's most vulnerable chapter, Carol's presence wasn't just maternal, it was strategic. Loyal to the monarchy, but loyal first to her daughter. To the public, Carol's appearance carried profound emotional weight. She wasn't a royal, not officially, but in the eyes of many, she had become something more symbolic, a surrogate representative for the woman they loved, and the mother of the next queen. Her grace, her silence, her mere attendance reminded the world that Catherine was still here, even if not physically present, and that she was surrounded by strength. Throughout Catherine's battle with cancer, Carol had been described by insiders as the invisible shield, never offering public comment, never seeking recognition, but always there, behind every private appointment, behind every recovery milestone. A mother not just watching her child suffer, but holding up an entire image of stability when the palace itself began to tremble. It was maternal strength, at its most ferocious and most tender. But even as Carol stood in for her daughter, the world kept looking for one face, and then, they saw something. She smiled for the cameras, but not even royalty can hide what the body reveals. As Catherine returned to public life at Trooping the Colour and Garter Day, the images broadcast around the world told one story: radiance, elegance, composure. But for those watching closely, something else was visible, something deeper. Between the waves and graceful nods were fleeting moments that didn't make headlines but said everything. Moments that revealed the silent toll of her illness, a hand raised to her lips, a subtle cough, a shift in posture, a fraction slower than usual. No royal statement was made, but her body was speaking volumes. The cameras were unrelenting, capturing every second of the parades, the balcony appearances, the formal engagements. And while Catherine never broke her serene expression, a few seconds of footage showed her discreetly covering her mouth, just as the guards marched past. To some it looked like nothing, but to those who had followed her journey through chemotherapy, it was a flashing signal. Fatigue, discomfort, fragility not gone, just hidden beneath layers of duty. Later that day, as she stood alongside the royal family watching the RAF fly past, another cough escaped, this time slightly more visible. Again, she raised her hand to her mouth. Again she smiled through it. But the signs were there, subtle, heartbreaking. Her shoulders seemed to bear more than ceremonial weight, and though she stood tall, her movements were slower, more calculated, almost as if each step was an effort, each gesture a decision. It was this quiet struggle performed behind the facade of royal grace that moved the public most. This wasn't the image of a woman who had conquered illness with ease. It was the image of someone still fighting, still recovering, still pushing through pain because she knew the world was watching, because she understood that her presence, even imperfect, was a beacon of reassurance, and because disappearing again wasn't an option. Not now. Reactions poured in from across the globe. Admirers praised her courage. Experts and commentators gently acknowledged the physical toll they saw on her. But perhaps the most profound response came from ordinary people, those who had faced illness, those who had fought their own invisible battles. They saw in her not just a princess, but a reflection of themselves. A woman holding herself together, not for power, but for purpose. Behind the grandeur of public events lay a much deeper story of quiet suffering and unwavering courage. Long before her dazzling return, Catherine was fighting a battle no camera could capture. Behind palace walls, far from the pageantry of royal engagements and glittering state dinners, the Princess of Wales was confronting something far more brutal than any scandal or headline. It began quietly, unnoticed by the public, shielded by royal discretion, a diagnosis that would shake the foundations of her life: cancer. The world wouldn't learn of it until January 14, 2025, when the palace released a carefully worded statement confirming what many had feared and few had imagined. But by then, Catherine was already deep into the fight. The timeline between diagnosis and announcement remains intentionally vague, guarded like a crown jewel. The decision to delay the news wasn't out of secrecy, it was survival. Catherine needed space, time, and control over a narrative that had once defined her only as a fashion icon or future queen. Suddenly she was something else entirely. A woman in crisis. The palace, often accused of emotional coldness, took a rare human turn. They balanced silence with strategy, protecting her while preparing the public for the truth. But even the most strategic silence couldn't stop the speculation. Every cancelled appearance, every blurred photograph, every missed event became a spark for rumors. And when the confirmation finally came, it wasn't accompanied by tears, it was paired with dignity. Catherine's public message was calm, reassuring, and heartbreakingly composed. She spoke not as a royal, but as a mother, a wife, and a woman navigating an unimaginable storm. But what she didn't say, what no press release could convey, was the toll that storm had already taken. Chemotherapy doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about titles or bloodlines. And in Catherine's case, it collided with the relentless scrutiny of the global press. Every step she took outside her home became a matter of speculation. Was she thinner? Pale? Smiling enough? There was no room to be vulnerable in peace. But somehow she endured. She remained poised in the rare moments she was seen. And in the moments she wasn't, she fought. Her decision to retreat from public view wasn't weakness, it was preservation. For months she disappeared. No events, no appearances, just whispers. And still she never allowed herself to be portrayed as a victim. There were no hospital photo ops, no pity pieces leaked through friendly media. Only silence. And in that silence, the world began to worry and to wait. Inside the palace, sources say she was surrounded by a tight circle of supporters, Carol Middleton chief among them. William too stood by her side, not as the heir to the throne, but as a husband desperately protecting his wife. It was this cocoon of loyalty and love that allowed Catherine to endure the most painful chapter of her life without ever losing her identity. She was still the Princess of Wales, but she was also something more, now something forged in fire. But just when many thought she might fade quietly into the background, Catherine did something that changed everything. She didn't just return, she reclaimed her power. When Catherine stepped out for Trooping the Color, it wasn't merely a public appearance, it was a message. Timed with delicate precision, her return landed not just on the ceremonial calendar, but at a pivotal moment in the monarchy's evolving story. Months had passed since the world last saw her in motion, and now, under the intense gaze of millions, she returned to her place not as a passive figure in a royal tableau, but as a force of quiet authority. The crowd erupted as she emerged, but what followed wasn't about spectacle. It was about symbolism. The royal balcony, usually a stage for protocol, became something far more intimate. Standing beside King Charles and Prince William, Catherine projected unity not just within the family, and there, at her side, were her children, each gesture between them, reinforcing an unspoken promise that the next generation of royals would be grounded in love, resilience, and continuity. Observers quickly turned to body language experts, hungry to decipher every movement, and what they saw spoke louder than any press release. Catherine's posture was controlled, yet soft. Her hands remained gently clasped, her expressions calm but not robotic. She exuded composure, but beneath it all was a layer of visible effort, an unmistakable testament to the emotional and physical weight she was carrying. Grace under pressure wasn't a performance, it was her reality. But it wasn't just the monarchy that noticed. The public, still processing her health battle, saw something deeply personal in her reappearance. Her presence stirred a collective emotion, a blend of awe and protectiveness. She wasn't just their princess, she had become a symbol, a woman who had been knocked down, stared into the abyss of her own mortality, and stood back up in front of the world with quiet defiance. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. There was a tenderness to her resilience, a kind of strength that didn't demand attention but commanded respect. In the backdrop of an institution often criticized for being aloof or outdated, Catherine's authenticity cut through like a beacon. She didn't speak that day, but she didn't need to. Her every movement told the story of survival, of commitment, of purpose reborn. But Catherine's impact wasn't limited to royal pageantry, it was about what she chose to focus on next. As the world cheered her return, she unveiled a mission that might shape a generation. Just days after reclaiming her place on the royal stage, Catherine made another bold move, one that had nothing to do with appearances or tradition. In a statement that caught even seasoned royal watchers off guard, the Princess of Wales announced a deeply personal new initiative under her royal foundation. Titled Happy Little Minds. The program wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't headline bait. But for Catherine, it was everything. A direct response to what she believes is one of the most urgent issues facing modern Britain, and something she'd been quietly crafting behind the scenes while the world speculated on her health. Happy Little Minds is aimed at revolutionizing how emotional development and mental health are addressed in early childhood education. It targets children from infancy to 5 years old, a window Catherine has long emphasized as critical to lifelong well-being. The initiative isn't just a campaign, it's a pilot program designed to place trained mental health specialists in schools, helping support the emotional growth of the youngest minds during their most formative years. It's ambitious. It's groundbreaking, and it's deeply reflective of who Catherine is when the cameras turn away. What stunned many was not just the scale of the initiative but the timing. After months of intense treatment and recovery, most expected her to ease slowly back into her royal duties. Instead, she returned with purpose, determined not to just stand beside the monarchy but to shape it. While others focused on her wardrobe, Catherine was building a legacy of impact, one rooted in compassion, not ceremony. The public response was swift and emotional. Admirers praised her bravery, not just for returning to public life, but for doing so with a mission bigger than herself. Critics of the monarchy, often quick to dismiss royal initiatives as symbolic gestures, were forced to acknowledge the substance behind her strategy. Catherine wasn't stepping into the future queen's role as a passive figurehead. She was laying the foundation for a monarchy that would lead with empathy. Her move also sent a quiet but unmistakable message to those within the royal institution. Catherine's influence wasn't confined to tiaras and titles. She had vision, strategy, and a deeply personal understanding of human vulnerability, shaped not only by her motherhood, but now, by her illness. Happy Little Minds was more than a program. It was a declaration that her reign, when it comes, will be defined not by tradition alone, but by transformation. Yet behind these bold moves lies a painful truth. Catherine may not be as present as we all hope. Her smile was real, but so was the effort behind it. While the world applauded Catherine's triumphant return and her renewed public mission, those closest to the palace knew something most didn't. Behind the elegance, behind the carefully curated appearances and noble grace, was a woman still walking a tightrope between recovery and duty. Royal insiders, bound by discretion yet nudged by concern, have begun to hint at what many fear. Catherine's health is still in flux. Her return, though powerful, was not a declaration of total recovery, it was a statement of intent. But even intent has its limits. Medical experts who haven't treated her directly but understand the brutal toll of chemotherapy know the truth. The monarchy cannot say out loud. Post-chemo fatigue isn't a momentary lapse, it's a lingering storm. It arrives unpredictably, draining energy, slowing movement, impairing clarity. For someone in Catherine's position, where even a balcony wave becomes global news, pacing isn't a luxury, it's a requirement for survival. Every step, every smile, every engagement is calculated not out of vanity, but necessity. Her team doesn't plan appearances based on schedules alone anymore, they plan them around her strength. That's why her moments in the spotlight are so brief. That's why she disappears just as quickly as she returns. And that's why many within the palace expect future appearances to remain carefully curated and symbolic. The days of constant engagements and marathon royal tours may not return for some time, if ever. Instead, the monarchy is adjusting, quietly but unmistakably, to a new rhythm. A rhythm set not by protocol, but by Catherine's body. And that quiet shift speaks louder than any announcement ever could. Among the public, something unspoken has begun to take root, a quiet understanding, forged not by press statements but by shared human experience. They see her. They remember loved ones who've walked the same road. They know that healing isn't linear, and strength doesn't mean being present all the time. They recognize that her absence is not weakness, it's wisdom. And they are choosing to offer her something rare in the world of royalty: grace. But even with that grace, even with admiration swelling around her like a wave, the reality remains. She is still healing. And while she wears the title of princess and stands as the future queen, what she carries now is heavier than any crown. And yet, in the face of all uncertainty, Catherine's story now carries something far greater than a royal title. In every whispered worry and every public cheer, one truth remains: she is loved beyond measure. Catherine's journey has never been just about titles or tiaras. From the moment she stepped into the public eye as Prince William's poised and polished partner, she was measured against impossible standards. But over time, something remarkable happened. She began to redefine those standards entirely. No longer just the Duchess of Cambridge. No longer only the future Queen Consort. Catherine has evolved into something far more enduring. She has become a survivor, not only of a brutal illness but of a system that often devours its own. Across the globe, the admiration for her has grown not just because of what she represents, but because of how she has handled everything thrown at her with grace that never looked forced, and strength that never sought praise. In an era when authenticity is rare in royal circles, Catherine has offered it in quiet, powerful doses. Her silence when the world demanded details. Her composure when the headlines turned invasive. Her presence when absence might have been easier. These weren't just royal duties fulfilled. They were deeply human choices made under the most intense scrutiny imaginable. And the people noticed. They connected to her not because she was perfect, but because she wasn't pretending to be. Every public appearance became a collective moment of hope. Every gesture, no matter how small, was dissected not for scandal, but for reassurance. People didn't just watch her, they rooted for her. She had become more than a princess, she had become their princess. Her return to the spotlight beside King Charles and Prince William didn't just restore a public image, it reshaped it. In those moments, the weight of monarchy felt different, less about bloodlines and crowns, and more about humanity and endurance. Standing between the monarch and the heir, Catherine symbolized not just continuity, but strength reborn. It was a visual statement more powerful than any speech. The woman who had once been scrutinized for her silence was now being revered for it. The world no longer saw a supporting figure, they saw a pillar. And this, perhaps, is the most emotional truth of all. Her resilience has become the monarchy's greatest hope. In a time when institutions falter and public faith wavers, Catherine has reminded people of what's worth believing in: not power, but perseverance, not position, but purpose. She has become the soul of a new era for the crown, not by demanding the spotlight, but by enduring in its harshest glow. And as Catherine walks through the storm with elegance, one thing is clear: the monarchy may have found its future in her strength, not just her crown. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.